Okay. Hello everybody. And now for some completely different. We have news on colliding hashes. The ball is rolling. One of the biggest challenges in the practical cryptography, finding a collision for secure hash, what is it? Don't know, is tackled. Learn how you can contribute. This event is given by Christian Richberger. He learned about practical results of the study and exploration, and he is from Graz. Please give him a big hand.
Yeah. Hello everyone, thanks for the nice introduction. And I will start right away with a question. Who of you guys have used a hash function today? Hands up. A hash function. Did you use a hash function today? Well, quite a bunch, indeed. Let's take a look at this list. Did you use an SSL secured website? Did you use SSH? Did you enter a password somewhere? Probably did you digitally sign something? Did you rely on integrity checks wherever? What all these things and many more have in common is that they rely on some properties, some security of a fundamental building block, hash functions. So let me ask you again, who of you used a hash function today? Very good. Well, there are several properties we want to have from these fundamental building blocks. Think of it as a pyramid, where at the foundation we have these fundamental building blocks, hash functions, ciphers, similar things. On top of that we have protocols and then applications. And of course we want our fundament to be as good and as strong as possible. So, hash functions. Of course they should be efficient and easy to compute. If they would be difficult to compute, nobody would want to use them unless in some niche areas. And there are two more properties we would like to have. I will go into them immediately. One of the properties is one-way, and the other one is collision resistance. The one-way property of a hash function. Well, this is our hash function. It accepts inputs of arbitrary length, outputs something of fixed length. It's called hash value, digest, fingerprint, whatever. And now it should be difficult to invert this hash function. It should be difficult to go back. Given a hash value, it should be computationally infeasible to find an input such that fed into the hash function results into this output given. Many applications rely on this difficulty. For example, if a hash function is used to store a password, you don't want to have an algorithm which allows to somehow reconstruct the password given the hash of it. Also payment schemes like Hashcash relies on this one-way property. Also key derivation, which is commonly used if you have some sort of master key, derive some more key material from that. You don't want the case that once one of your subkeys is compromised that someone can go back to your master key. That's why this one-way property is very important. Many more applications. There's a second very important property, which is collision resistance. That's what I'm mainly focusing in the next 30-40 minutes or so. Think of calling this hash function twice. Of course, if you feed in the same input twice, you will also get the same output. It's deterministic. However, if you change something at input, something completely different should pop out at the end. What collision resistance means is that it should be infeasible to somehow find two different inputs that map to the same output. Well, the trouble is, as soon as the number of possible inputs is larger than the number of possible outputs, you can't prevent the very existence of collisions. But it shouldn't be easier than just randomly trying and hoping that you find a colliding message. I have an application, so well, collisions shouldn't happen. you need this property in integrity checks where you face adversaries. You need this when you use it for authentication in digital signatures in Macs. And it's also very often required by law, at least in Europe. Once your hash function is not collision resistant anymore, you shouldn't use this. As an example, digital signatures. If it would be possible to create two inputs to a hash function, for example, a contract, which map to the same hash value, where something like the sum is changed as depicted here, then this would also result into the same signature. And if you can do this in advance, if you can prepare these two versions, then actually can forge signature, and that's very bad, of course. Hash functions are a rather hot topic at the moment. The reason is that some new results shedded some doubts on the security of very commonly used hash functions. One of the interesting properties is that, as you noticed before, even though cryptography is very often about secret private keys, we don't have a key in hash functions. And we still require some security, whatever that exactly means. The most important and most heavily used hash functions nowadays are SHA-1, which I'm now talking about, and MD5, an older one. What you see here is that they are all actually based on the same design strategy, namely on MD4, which was pioneered by Ronald West, the RFRSA, in the late 80s, early 90s. Well, what happened not that long afterwards, it was a very fast hash function targeted for commodity processors, 32 bits. In 96, what happened, the German cryptographer Hans Dobertin found a very good attack on this hash function. He managed to come up with a colliding pair of messages for this hash function. Well, by then, Rivest already proposed a successor, MD5, and what also happened in the States, NSA, the American NSA also used this same idea and proposed their own hash function, their own family of hash functions to be used in their federal standards. It was called SHA, Secure Hash Algorithm. Not that long afterwards, they tweaked it a little and renamed it to SHA-1. And that was about in 95, and since then, this very hash function ended up in many, many standards. All of the RFCs are full of requiring SHA-1, many more. There's also an Australian variant of MD4 and an European variant of MD4. Everything fine until about 3 years ago. Suddenly a group of Chinese researchers came up with a rather new method and buff. Collisions for MD5, collisions for Haval, collisions for RIPE-ND. That was rather surprising at the time. And so for all of these hash functions, collisions have been produced. Around the same time, also the predecessor of SHA-1, SHA, was affected as well. The first theoretical hints that there might be weaknesses were already discovered in 98 or so, but it took 7 or 8 years until the first colliding message pair was produced for SHA. So there's not that much left, as you see. What about SHA-1? So far there's no colliding message pair, and there's a lot of uncertainty on if and how much is going to happen there. And you will learn about that soon. First of all, I would like to introduce you to this family and briefly outline how they look like and how they work. They are iterative in the sense that they accept always inputs of fixed length, operate on them, update an internal state, and produce some output, which is either the output of the hash or fed in into a new round of inputs and processing and outputs. This goes on and on until the end of the input is reached and the final hash value is computed. This, what we call compression function, is divided into two parts: the message expansion and a state update. First, let's take a look at the message expansion. So we have 16 input words of 32 bits each, meaning 512 bits. They are expanded. In the case of MD4, MD5, and RIPE-MD, this message expansion is a very simple process, very fast, of course. It's about copying message words and shuffling them around a bit, not more. The NSA designs, SHA and SHA-1, they do a little different things. In fact, they use a linear recurrence relation to derive the expanded message words, which is supposed to make things more complicated. Then the newer members of the SHA family, there's even more complicated stuff going on. Here there's a non-linear recurrence relation. What you see in general, this tendency of increased design complexity. Of course, these changes make them slower, which is not that nice. It supposedly makes them more secure, but what the problem is, because it's more complex, it's also harder to analyze, and it's less likely to be certain about the security. Okay, that's the message expansion. Let's take a look at the second part, the state update. Again, what we see is an increase in design complexity. MD4 was rather simple, 4 state variables, very simple building blocks. In the case of SHA, we have already 5. In the case of SHA-2, 8. The building blocks are simple operations meant to be very fast on commodity processors, modular addition, XOR, bit shifts, simple Boolean functions. Again, they are more complex, makes them harder to analyze, so supposedly more secure. How would we want now to try to produce a collision? Well, think of the picture I had before. We call the hash function twice, different inputs, and somehow try to find an input that maps to the same output. Well, we can try to start with one input and only flip 1 or 2 bits, a very small number of bits, such that hopefully differences won't spread too much, and in the end difference will cancel out. So our goal is to find a difference between 2 messages such that in the end, after processing, the difference disappears. And hence we have a collision. Well, to get a feeling for that, let's do the most simple case. We flip just a single bit and let's see what happens. So we zoom in, flip a bit here, the first message word. Zoom in again. So we flip a bit here. Not much happens, it's only copied to this particular state variable. So this one is affected now. Well, in the second step, variable A is copied to B. Variable A is also rotated by 5. Changed here, copied to A again. So in the next step, already 2 of the 5 variables are affected. While this goes on, A is copied to B again in the next step. B is rotated, copied to C. B also goes into this function. F does something and again influences the new variable A. So as we see differences spread, it doesn't seem to be a lot of control possibilities. Goes on and goes on. Guess you get the idea. And if you now take the bird's eyes view again, what we did, we flipped a single bit here, which caused a number of bit flips at the output of this message expansion, and in turn caused some bit flips at the beginning of this state. But what happens rather soon in the course of, in the case of SHA-1 it's 80 steps, rather soon in the course of these 80 steps, differences spread uncontrollably, randomly, and what we would want is that in the end we don't have differences anymore. We would want to get rid of all these red dots. That's actually how a good hash function is supposed to work. No way to control how differences spread. Well, after lots of head scratching, what happens is that if you don't flip a single bit, but a certain set of bits,